This is the second half of the lecture about conducting a literature research. In this half, I'm going to talk through some research tips and how to find things, and then talk a little bit about composing and actually putting together what you find. When you're doing a research review or a literature review, you need to focus mostly on primary sources. These are the original research that was done by the original researchers. That's not to say that you throw out the secondary sources. Reviews can be really valuable. Book chapters, handbooks, all of those sorts of things have information that you can find, but you need to focus mostly on the actual primary research that was done. I wanted to speak for a few minutes about what's called a meta-analysis. You will come across these in articles, and they are considered primary sources because the researcher has taken data from a whole bunch of different studies that have been done and then statistically put them together to build a model that includes all of it. And what it does is they can pool the estimates of the different effects of all these that were found in these different studies, and then they can compare them. And a good meta-analysis has to justify the inclusion and exclusion of different studies and why they put together the data that they did. These can be very, very informative and are becoming more and more current in the research world. They're a little tricky to read sometimes because the statistics are very deep, and you sometimes have to wade through some of them. Get to the conclusions and the discussion at the end of the article, and you may find some really rich findings there with a meta-analysis. Your textbook approaches the steps of doing a literature review very linear, and I don't see it that way. Those of you who've done research know this. You start out with some keywords and phrases, and you start searching, and then other words pop up, and you go back to keywords and you search again. And it's very cyclical or iterative as you go back and forth. It's not linear at all. When you're looking for keywords to use, start with what you already know about the field or a particular article that you've read that really fascinated you. And then keep in mind that different words or phrases come from different researchers in different parts of the world. Articles and book chapters often have, so don't discount the reference lists that are with the articles. At UNLV, you have access to some incredible databases, and you need to find which ones work for you. I would challenge you this semester to try out some different ones in a low pressure situation and maybe discover something new and fun. Just a word about Google searches. Our inclination is to simply go to the internet and start doing a search, and that's great. We all do it. But the problem is that when you find an article, you may not have access to it, and you'll have to log in through a database anyway or subscribe to the journal. So just a word about that. The databases are probably a lot more efficient because they're set up to do exactly what you need them to do. Some journals and handbooks have indices and online resources also that can help you to find articles that you need. A couple of things to keep in mind as you search so that you can filter. How far back are you going to go? Are you going to go back to the fellow with the stone tablet, or are you going to keep it more current? Are you going to limit your search to just what's been peer-reviewed or refereed journals? Don't discount secondary sources if they can help you. Are you going to look only in English? There may be some research out there in another language that you speak or can get translated that could be really powerful. And I'm probably giving you tips here for when you do some pretty high-end research down the road. Are you going to limit your search to only those pieces where the whole text is available? It can be very frustrating to find an article that you think is just going to be terrific, and then all you can find is the abstract. And you're going to need to dig deeper for that. You can almost always find the original article. Next, you need to actually abstract or extract the information to get at the meat of what you need. Start by reading the abstract. This is your first decision point. Read through it, and remember I told you that the abstract should give away the ending. From the abstract, you should be able to tell what the researchers did and what they found and what the problem was that they were dealing with. Then skim through the article. I like to go to the conclusion and the results because that lets me know what these people found and how they tied it back to their original problem. Always capture the complete citation. It is so frustrating to remember an article and then have to go back and try and find it. So capture the citation. Classify and code every article that you find as you're doing a full search. And I'm going to talk to you in a minute about this and some suggestions for doing this. You need to find a way to organize your information so that you can find what you need and go back to it. Summarize the article. Put the article, make a quick synopsis of it and the high points, your thoughts, your questions as you read it. Capture direct quotes. You may not use them as direct quotes, but they give you the flavor of the article and help you to remember it. And then remember to look at the references that are also at the end of each article, because that gives you a jumping off point for more information. Each of you needs to come up with a system that works for you for capturing this information as you go through and do your literature search. This is going to date me, but we used to use index cards. Everything got written down on the index cards, and we color coded them, and we put dots on them, and we alphabetized them so that we could organize and then write from there. And there are still researchers who do that, and it works for them. Some folks like to use a table, and the value of a table is that you can have column headings and put information from articles into the column headings so that it's all clearly spelled out and it starts to be organized for you. I like to use a spreadsheet or a database because then that's searchable and I can go back and find what I need. And I'll show you an example of that on the next slide. Remember too that you have access to Refworks through the UNLV library, but keep in mind that it can be really tricky to save these searches and it's very frustrating. So once you get a search, always send it to yourself through email or put it in a Dropbox or something like that. And then you have to decide if you are a to-print or not to-print person. Personally, I like to grab an electronic copy of every article that I find and I put it in a folder like in Dropbox so that I've got it there when I need to go back to it. This is an example of how I set up a spreadsheet to keep track of what I'm using. And it's searchable. I can put it in the cloud so I can use it wherever I want to. And you can see some of the headings there that I use so that I can fill in information that I found from that article. You can also put a link to where the article is stored electronically. So if I've got that article electronically in my Dropbox, in one of these cells, I can put in the actual link and pull up the electronic document from there. Keep in mind that whatever process you use is only going to be as good as the information you put into it. If you do a cursory job and just put a little bit of information in here, you're not really helping yourself because you're going to get frustrated and find that you needed more information and you're going to be going back to these articles over and over and over again. Try to get as much out of it in the first pass that you can. I've also used simply a word processing document where I just take my notes about the article in the word processor. That's kind of nice because then I can cut and paste and rearrange things when I'm getting ready to compose and kind of form an outline. And you can still search it. If you haven't discovered the navigation features in the view menu of Word, I'd suggest that you check that out. When you end up with a word processing document that's 100 pages long, it's pretty hard to scroll through and find what you want. And your navigation system can let you set that up with headings and make it very, very powerful. I spoke earlier about the Refworks from UNLV, and you may want to pause and take a screenshot of this or write down this URL here. All of the information that you need is here. And one thing that's nice about Refworks is it will put it in APA style for you so that you've got it captured in the style that you need. Now you're ready to compose. You've got all this stuff. Start with your outline and think very carefully how you want to organize this. You're telling a story and building a case for your research, so you want to make it a really compelling and tight, logical case for your research. One possibility would be to organize what you found chronologically, starting from the beginning of time and the seminal research and then showing how it has evolved over time. Another possibility would be to organize it by topic as you go through the research and organize it that way. I like to start very general, and then I tend to get moved down to specific to the stuff that will couch my research and build the case for it. I've also used themes where you set up it's a little bit like the topics, the themes as you go through. For example, I was doing some research with analogies, and I was able to group the research that I found by 4 kinds of analogies and address each of those in the research that had been done. Another powerful way to organize your lit review is with methods. So you could include a section on the qualitative research that had been done and a section